Welcome to creating a high school transcript. My name is Jenny Morrill. I am Principal Secretary here at Mountain Vista Homeschool Academy in Colorado Springs. I have been working here as Principal Secretary for 3 years. My background is I have 2 children that I homeschooled for about 12 years and graduated both of them through homeschooling. And what led to creating this little program for you, this presentation, was that my son had a need several years ago for a transcript because he wanted to apply at the local UCCS campus, and I needed to figure out how to do that for him. So it took some research and some figuring things out on my own, and was able to come up with a successful transcript, which led to his being accepted at UCCS. So let's get started and see how this goes. Okay, so next we'll start with gather the basic information. So first I want to clarify that this presentation is of a mindset to send your student to college. It's not necessarily, you certainly can create a transcript just to have as a record at home. It might be a useful tool to have in the future, but just have that in mind. So this is what kind of the basis of this whole presentation is going to be. So this is sort of the beginnings of this. You're setting the stage for high school. Figuring out your classes or courses that your student is going to do. For example, Algebra 1, Intro to Literature, Art, those types of things you're going to need to choose and figure out kind of a plan, what courses you want your student to do for each year of high school, 9th through 12th grades, and or work backwards. If you've already done the work, then you can break it down by the year that your student has already done these classes. We'll get into that a little bit later. Then also course descriptions. I think it's really helpful to have a brief synopsis or description of what each course is and what it will entail as far as a final grade. For your own reference, you could also include this on a transcript. Let's see. One example I have here is Intro to Literature, which is one of the classes. And the book would be that is used as literature, Intro to Literature by so-and-so, and will require 8 classic works to be read, evaluated by essay, and a final 3 to 5 page paper on each book on various topics. Here's some other examples of course content or course descriptions, titles. So here's one, art. My request is that, and I think it would be really helpful in a transcript to be specific. So art isn't necessarily self-explanatory. Be very specific. Call it art clay sculpturing, or art watercolors, or drawing 101, something like that. And then explain in a description what drawing 101 was, and then what would be what would entail for the final grade on that. Or PE, not just physical education, but it was karate, or it was taekwondo, or it was weightlifting, something like that. Another thing that can be included on a transcript is if a student has a job, include this as a work study. So for example, if Chick-fil-A was one of those positions, or working at the Pioneer Museum, a work study can earn credits depending on the number of hours worked during the semester or the school year, excuse me. So I would think that it would be helpful to include in course description a list of their responsibilities, the hours that they work, evaluate them by having them write a final paper about their experience, what they learned and valued from this job. That can be a really good help on a transcript. Okay, next we have course calendar, where you're going to determine the number of courses during a quarter, semester, or year. So for example, the fall semester of the 9th grade year, you might want to do 6 courses, and that could entail core classes like English, literature, it could be Algebra 1, it could be a computer class, and that could be specifically Excel or basic coding. History could be American Revolution, then a science course like biology, and then maybe a special photography or something like that. And then you also want to decide what the duration of the course is, how long it is going to take. If it's going to take a semester or a year, that might need to be determined later. You may come back to it and figure out, okay, well, we've done this. It's taken all year long to do Algebra 2 instead of just a semester. So that's how you're going to determine if it's a half a credit or a whole credit. Okay, gather the basic information. Here we're going to determine how do you know if it's a half credit or a full credit. Each course should be valued at either one credit or a half credit, depending on the class duration. I didn't deal with quarter credits. We didn't do anything that was a quarter of a year long, so we just dealt with it in this way, and felt like that was really going to be more efficient for doing the transcript and a little less tedious. So if you add class time plus homework, that is how I determine course hours. So if the class time was 1 hour a day, 4 days a week, so that's 4 hours plus homework time, so if that was another 4 hours, so 8 hours a week over the course of however many weeks they're taking that class would determine the number of course hours. So then you can look at the little chart. Is it within the half credit range, or is it within the 1 credit range? And I do value homework as valid course hours because they are learning. That is part of their learning experience and the time that they put into the class. Also want to mention college courses. Yes, you can include college courses on your student's transcript. It's like dual enrollment. So generally, they are worth 1 high school credit. And it's best to keep track of hours and the time spent in class and homework and all that to know if it's really worth a full credit or if it's a half credit. I know a college class, they value a course at a 3 credit hour if it's like English 121. But for high school, this is your guideline for determining credit. Okay. Course evaluation continued. So you're going to determine, you've got your classes kind of figured out, you've got some of your materials figured out, and now you're going to figure out, well, what's going to be graded? What's going to have measurable value? Some examples would be attendance, quizzes, tests, essays, discussions, homework, projects, etc. So then from that, you're going to also determine the grading scale. So if you wanted to do something like a weighted scale using a 5-point scale for students taking AP courses, I would recommend you take a look at some of the resources I list at the end of this presentation to utilize those. For my experience and for my son, we used a 4-point scale, and that was sufficient and worked really well for us, and it also kept things very simple. and not complicated. And also I want to mention, in the class that I taught at the school, we had a sample transcript that we handed out, and that can also be found on the website under parents. So you could use that as to look at while you're going through this presentation if you need to. My apologies for not mentioning that sooner. Okay, so now we are on to kind of the breakdown. So if quizzes, homework, and tests are going to be going to make up the final grade for a class, what's the breakdown? So for example, I have quizzes could be 25% of a final grade, homework could be another 25%, and tests would be equal to 50%. Another example would be reading and discussion could be 50% of a grade. Essays and papers could be the other 50%. It's sort of the way you want to determine, it depends on each class. One might be if it's a physical education class on karate, how are you going to determine a grade for that? That might be more like a pass-fail kind of thing. So if there was participation, 100% participation, then they got 100% of the grade and a 4.0 for the class. So these are just some examples that I use, and then we'll kind of break it down a little bit further. My recommendation, and I don't think it would make it, I think I would recommend this for any of them, but to make sure that you are come up with 100% for each course of how it's going to be divided up to determine the grade. So the 25% plus 50% getting 100%, or 45% plus 55%. I think it would get complicated for you if you broke it down with 37.5 and 12 point whatever, and then you ended up with kind of a weird percentage at the end. So just a recommendation. Okay, let's do the math. So once you've have the data for each course, it's time to calculate final grades and GPA. So let's kind of work on that, and I'll go try to be as clear and concise as possible. Okay, so we're going to use Algebra 1 as an example. It took my son 2 semesters to go through Algebra 1, and we broke it down with quizzes being 25% of the grade, homework being 25% of the grade, and tests being 50% of the grade. So this white box here is a sample off of the sample transcript that I have provided. And so if you add up all those 10 quizzes on the left, you total them and you average them, you get 87.4%. Same deal with the homework. If you add all those 100% and average it, you get 100% for homework. And then the tests, adding all those scores, and then you get 90.8% for that. So we're going to take those numbers and go to the next. So based on your totals there, for Algebra 1, we'll take the quiz total first, 87.4%, that's 25%, and then the homework next, because that is 25%. Those are equally weighted. So we're going to start with that. And jump down to number 1 under C. So first, you add A plus B, so 87.4 plus 100% equals 187.5. You're going to divide that by 2 to get 93.75. So now this makes up 50% of the grade. So now you add the 93.75 plus the tests, so you have 50% plus 50% of the grades. 184.55 is the total, divide by 2. You get 92.275. So then you take that total, and then you multiply that by 0.04, and that is from the grading scale, the 4-point grade scale that I use. And and the result there is 3.69 for the grade point average for Algebra 1. I hope that made sense. I think if you work through those totals a couple times, it'll start making sense. It helped me to do several classes, and then it helped solidify how I was doing this, and then it went by pretty quick. Okay, so let's use creative writing as another example instead of Algebra 1. So creative writing can be a little bit more subjective. So for my son's experience, he did 12 classes. This was a special class that he did that I signed he and my daughter up for. So it was 12 classes at 4 hours a class, plus the assignments, and I figured out how long that took, and that would have equaled 1 credit, even though it was really a 12-week course. So I graded them based on weekly participation, which was discussion and notes, and attendance. I should have included that. And then weekly assignments were scene development and writing and editing their work, and then they had to turn that in every week to their teacher. So those two things I weighed at 50% for each part of their grade. So another example, or this kind of comes on the heels of that one. So if I give them 50% of the grade for their discussions and note-taking, their weekly participation, and 50% of their weekly assignments, then one option for full attendance, full participation, full everything, I gave them, you could grade them at 100%, which is a 4.0 GPA. Or if you wanted to be a little more particular, another suggestion, same deal, same number of hours, same number of types of participation. But I looked at it a little bit differently. So if my son missed one of those classes, and I didn't do the math correctly on here, I see. If my student missed one of the 12 classes, I divided 11 into 12 to get 92%. So please make that correction. My apologies. But completed all assignments, gave him 100% on those, added those two totals, the 92% plus the 100%, 192 points, and then divided that by 2 to get 96. So 96 times 0.04 from the grading scale resulted in 3.84 grade point average for that class. Okay, let's take another example. Let's do History of the Middle Ages. Okay, so this took 2 semesters. We broadened the scope, so it was a 2-semester course, so it was a 1-credit class. Unless you're using a pre-planned curriculum that divides it out and says you're going to be doing quizzes and you're going to be doing tests and you're going to be doing research, that it's all laid out so you know how you're going to grade your student, that's super helpful. And but in my case, we didn't do it that way. I had to make it up as I went along and figured out how I was going to evaluate him. So I did it by thirds. He had to do research, which was reading, discussion, notes, and then he did projects. So that was presentations, a diorama he had to put together, and a project board. And then also papers. He did some essays and a research paper. So those three components made up the final grade. And this is how we broke it down. So for research, he did 8 assignments. Those all 8 assignments totaled 673 points total. And then we divided that by 8 and to get 84.13%. So he had about a B just on research assignments. Then for projects, he did 4 assignments, and those totaled about 356 points. Divided that by 4 to get 89%. And then the papers that I assigned him, those totaled 370 points. Divided that by 4 for the 4 assignments to get 92.5%. Was that we took those totals because they were equal, a third of the final grade each. So 84.13 plus 92.5 plus 89 resulted in 256.63. Divided that by 3 to get 88.54%. Multiplied 88.54 times 0.04 for the grade scale. And so his final GPA for that particular course was 3.54. Okay, so this is just a sample transcript that on this screen is really hard to read, but you get kind of an idea. Again, there's a copy on the website that you can use to take a look at. And it was just based on an Excel spreadsheet that I put together. So nothing fancy. Let's see, I did not include class descriptions on the transcript. I just included class courses or titles only because UCCS did not require to have descriptions. However, I do recommend keeping a log of your class descriptions for each course so that if you're ever asked for it, then you're ready to go and you don't have to go back and reinvent the wheel later. So now we're going to put this all together in one transcript, all of the data that you've had for all of these classes, and then you're going to insert it into your spreadsheet or your transcript. You could I have at the end of this presentation a website listed that creates transcripts for you, so you would probably insert the information. I believe that there is a cost to that. They might offer some free services, but it would be helpful to look into. Again, just back to my example. We're just going to take a look at my transcript one step at a time, one section at a time. So the first section, the top part, we titled it Official Transcript. We named our school Homeschool Senior High, or you could call it Moral Senior High. In our case, that's what we did. You want to include the address of the school. You want to include the student's full name, gender, birth date, and then we have the parent names and address. Just some basic information. No social security. I wouldn't provide that unless the school asked specifically for that. Okay, so, excuse me, second section. We have academic record by year. And then underneath that, we have the year that the courses were being taken. So that would be the school year. So it would be a 2018-19 school year, 2015-16 school year, something like that. You have the title of the class, or you could even call it course title / description. That would be helpful. The completion date, when that course was done, the credit hours, and also the final GPA. So again, under academic record by year, here's a little bit better picture of what that looks like. And so you can see again that I didn't include any course descriptions, but I just had the title of the class. However, if you include them, some colleges would probably welcome it because it would give them, the more information you give them, the better picture they have of the student on paper. The less information you give them, it's not going to be, it may or may not be enough information for them. Okay, so If you look to the left where I have the year, I included in there early high school credits because I thought that Algebra 1, he took it his 8th grade year, and it could be a high school class or it could be an early high school class. Depends on your homeschool experience with your students. So I entered it as early high school credit. And then we started off with all of those different classes. So his freshman year, he didn't take as many classes as his sophomore year, which was 2010 through 2011. And then you can also see at the very bottom, 2012 through 13, we have classes that are to be determined. So at the time that we submitted this transcript, he had not completed several courses, and we have since then submitted an updated transcript. But I just wanted you to know it's probably helpful if you're going to submit a transcript early before classes have been completed and graded, include those classes that they're participating in. Let's see here. So, section 3, the very bottom. So you see where it says Survey of British Literature, that was the last of his to-be-determined courses. So underneath that we have special classes or activities, and you want to include the grades or the years that they attended those or participated in those. So for example, on my screen, my kids participated in a creative writing group in my son in his 11th and 12th grade years. And then other suggestions would be Boy Scouts or karate, the youth symphony, maybe volunteer work at the zoo or Pioneer Museum. Those kinds of things might be really helpful to include. Let's see, underneath that on the left-hand side, I have his ACT score. I would include SAT scores if your student takes both of them and identify them appropriately. And then in the middle, I have the grade point equivalent, the grading scale that I used. And again, I kept it simple. This was what I used across the board for all of his classes. He didn't take any AP level courses. So if your student is taking AP level courses, you may have to indicate 2 different grading scales if you're going to use 2 different grading scales, or if you're only going to use 4.0 or 5.0 grading scales, just to indicate what it is so that they know how you arrived or derived your GPAs. Okay, and then on the far right, a summary. So I totaled the number of credits to date that I had evaluated him under, and his final GPA was a 3.86. And then the graduation date. When I graduated him. Underneath that box, we have a place to sign and a place to date, are authorized by. So my husband and I signed it, and then we dated it, and then we had it notarized. That's completely optional to you. We just felt like it gave it a little more weight to notarize something, a document like this that we created, and I just felt like it offered a little bit more validity to it. Okay, so here is a few helpful resources that I used and highly recommend. Setting the Record Straight by Lee Binns, Comprehensive Homeschool Records by Lee Binns, and just a quick commentary. She has her own website and business to help high schoolers homeschooling through high school. So she's done it all. She's got a broad scope of experience and resources available on her website, but I do think that there is a fee. But these books are available on Amazon. We have a couple of them in our school library available to parents who have students who come to our school. And then also Transcripts Made Easy by Janice Campbell. I felt that was a really helpful resource too, another perspective. Then Transcript Maker, I had mentioned previously that if you want to gather your data and then input it into an already made transcript, that would be a good resource to use. Again, I'm not sure if it does cost anything to have them make a transcript for you. And then also the Homeschool Mom website was a wealth of information for homeschooling across the board, but there is quite a bit of information on homeschooling through high school. One other thing I wanted to mention was that other handouts that are available on our website are just some general information on homeschooling through high school. If you want to know about graduation requirements, how many credits would a college look for, that kind of thing, there's some resources there. Some of those pages include what District 2, District 11, and District 20 locally use as their grading requirement, or as their graduation requirements. So I would check into those as a guideline for you, so that you would know whether or not you're on the right track, if you're in line for preparing your student for college. If you have any questions, you are welcome to contact me at the school. My phone number is 719-579-2055, or I can be reached by email at jmorrill@hsd2.com, or excuse me, .org. Anyway, thank you very much for taking the time to view this. I hope it was helpful. If you have any comments or questions, I welcome those. And good luck on your creating your own transcripts.